Thank you. Thank you, Shamhita. It is, I'm both humbled and overjoyed at this invitation from a scholar of Srimati's stature to be a part of this panel discussion and then to share chairs with, the space with Professor Sanjukta Dasgupta, Nishi Sutanuka here, and with such a great erudite audience. A very good evening to all of you. We are here to celebrate this book, Women and Romance of the Word. And it is the title that first caught my imagination. What an imaginative and a creative title of a book that is not in that sense a creative writing, but it is a scholarly exposition of 19th century women. And of course, romance of the word, because it is with their romance with the word that today we are sitting where we are, which Srimati also mentions in her preface. Education was actually an uncharted territory, as we all know, for most of these women, and a social expectation also thwarted any desire towards such aspirations. So the women whom she brings under her scholarship, the lens of her scholarship, are all in various ways iconoclasts. We have three erudite panelists and the author herself today, and I'm not going to take much time before opening the discussion, but just a bit of housekeeping for us to keep the time. That is, we will have approximately 5 minutes per speaker 6 minutes per speaker at the beginning, and then a 2 minute for the second round. So with that, I hand over the microphone to Professor Sanjukta Dasgupta. Ma'am, please, with your...
Once again, good evening, everyone. As I just mentioned, this is a very special book. All right. So I just thought I'd just display it. Now, in terms of the very title of the book, which is, what is it?
The title of the book is Women and the Romance of the Word, 19th Century Context in Reading.
Yeah, and as this is the book, and as Nabanita said that the title caught her imagination, I was quite intrigued by that title also, because to associate romance with 19th century women is something that probably one would not readily be able to attribute to these women who wrote in the 19th century. In fact, most of you have watched the film Charulata, where Charulata wanted to write, and she was advised to write what she knows, and that is autobiography. She wrote Amar Gram, if you remember that scene. So women generally, it was assumed, had to be able to express themselves within that ambit of their experiential learning. That is what they were seeing, what they were observing, what they had felt, because they didn't know much more than that. And it was Tagore's daughter, the eldest one, Madhuri Lata, who had written a letter to Tagore saying that you are the one who goes out to so many parts of the world and you are so rich in experience, whereas I am trapped within the four walls of a house. And that is precisely what Tagore wrote after the passing away of Madhuri Lata, a poem called Shadharan May. And the Shadharan May said that, why don't you why do we have to have that lachrymose, that very weepy Sharachandra stories? That's the point. And so, in Shadharan May, the woman says, send me out. Let me have degrees. Send me out to the conferences. Let me go to Paris. Let me give lectures. And let the men hear me. And would the men be really hearing? Would the men be really the ones who would be able to understand what a woman feels? Because within the household, the role of the woman was as a caregiver, a service provider, and a person who was self-effacing. Anything else other than that was considered to be transgressive. And in fact, a writer whom I admire immensely, like Sunil Ganguly, in Shei Shohoe, makes fun of Swarna Kumari by saying that Swarna Kumari was so busy with a spot of ink on her nose that she didn't know how to even care for her own daughter. I was quite horrified. That's because after the death of the daughter who rolled down the stairs when Kadambini was given the duty of looking after her so that Swarna Kumari could spend more time in her writing. So these are the battlegrounds that women have negotiated. And in Srimati's particular book, what is also interesting, she starts with a Brahmo woman. Yes? নামগুলো কি আবার দুটোই তো কাছাকাছি আমার নাম কৈলাসবাসিনী আর কৃষ্ণ ভাবি আচ্ছা আচ্ছা কে ও তো ভাবে না না
তখনকার দিনের নামগুলো কি বড় বড়
হ্যাঁ আর কি সাংঘাতিক নাম সব তো যাই হোক ওই কৃষ্ণ ভাবিনী so the first was a Brahmo woman, if I'm not mistaken. The second was, I think, a Brahmo woman who was being schooled by the husband, which is why she criticizes and tears apart the Hindu women in that book.
That's Koilashbashini.
Yeah.
Krishnabhavini was...
No, I mean Koilashbashini. Yeah. The first one is Koilashbashini, who with a husband who was Brahmo tears into the Hindu ethos and also how Hindu women suffer. Yes? Then comes Rashu Sundari Devi. Her Amar Jivan is fantastic because this is a woman who learned to write at around the age of 60. And then she started, and when did she publish or give her son the permission to publish is when the husband died. So till the husband pops it, there is no way of a Hindu woman writing a book and getting it published. Again, 19th century. The third one is Hindu. The third one is Hindu, but a very, very elite household. Where she goes off to England, she's very well read, she can read English as well. And so her wide, I think, exposure, not only to experiential details, as I read from your book, but she was also quite aware of all what was happening in Western politics. And that is also reflected in her writing. And the fourth is also a Hindu woman. For me, the fourth, Noti Binodini, is very special. This was a single working woman at around the same time, and she spanned that entire period of Tagore's life. She was born in 1862, Tagore 1861, both of them died in 1941. How many of us remember a woman professional, a performer, taking to the Kolkata stage and being absolutely schooled by
Girish Ghosh.
I was about to say Karnad. Okay, so
Girish.
so Girish Ghosh, but there was another person also there about whom we don't talk so much because of that illicit love affair between the two, and that is Tagore's extremely handsome elder brother. Yes? So all this has factored in to a very, very liberated woman who writes after she has retired from the stage that I still long for those moments when a car would come and stop and pick me up and I would go back to the stage. Yes? And it reminds me also of Tagore's story Manubhanjan. Yes? So all these aspects of the 19th century woman, I would also, though Sreemati has sublimated their presence with the use of the word romance, I would also see it as power. I would also see it as a sort of epistemology of knowledge and power in those texts. And I would also like to see how this is represented in terms of colonial patriarchy and the patriarchy we have now, which is capitalist patriarchy. Here, in the 21st century, women are, I think, equally oppressed. But women have always been very clever because their minds work. And if the mind is without fear, then you can also pretend to lower your head and get what you want done. Yes, that's strategy. And women have achieved that by this wonderful balance of home and work, even now. They have had to give up a lot, and they are giving up a lot even to this day. But at the same time, this journey from the 19th century in terms of a woman of power who is expressing herself in the 19th century by falling back, I'm so sorry, by falling back on those moments which have been part of her personal experiences and her reminiscences and her recall and the sense of memory that is embedded in these texts. With that, and Nabanita here. Yes, I will give up. Sorry for taking a little more time. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And that's the worst part of being the moderator, that when you are trying to romance with the words that you are hearing, you have to also act and do this very bad job of asking someone to not to speak anymore. But thank you so much. We'll now move to Nishidi and hear what she has to say.
Thank you so much. It's an honor actually for me to be talking about Sreemati Di's book, and thank you Sreemati Di for thinking of me. And I have a big difficult task coming after Sanjukta Di as well. As I was reading the book, I mean Sreemati Di had sent the book some time ago, and as I was reading and thinking of what to say out here, I decided to focus just on one chapter, which is the chapter number 5. That is the chapter that talks about Krishna Bhavini Das. It's titled Travel Writer, Feminist, Sociologist, Patriot, Krishna Bhavini Das in England, Bongo Mohila. When one is talking about women's writing, it's not just as literature, but we're also looking at it as a social document. And we're also trying to enter into a feminist understanding or women's understanding, especially through the kind of writing that they're doing. The period that these women were writing, the 19th century, is a very, very interesting period, a period when women's question formed one of the major issues in national debate. So this is a period of great fervent, and that is the point of time when we have each of these women who find space in this work writing. There has been quite a lot of writing in recent times on literature written in the various Indian languages by women. When we are discussing these writings, we are discussing them very critically. We're looking at each of them as a social document of these women who were writing. And I think Sreemati Mukherjee's book, Women and the Romance of the Word, 19th century context, is a very important work of scholarship in this area as well. Krishna Bhavini Das I find to be a very, very interesting writer, because she's traveling at a point of time when not very many women were traveling. Of course, her status as an upper caste Hindu woman made it possible. But even then, she had a lot of difficulties when she decided to travel along with her husband. You know, her daughter was taken away from her by her father-in-law. And Srimati's chapter on this particular work situates the work in the context of the period, also situates the work in the context of Krishna Bhavini Das's own life. There's something else that the chapter also does, which I find very interesting, because she is also placing this particular work in the context of travel writing being done in India by men who were mostly traveling to study, and by some of these upper class women who were traveling mostly with their husbands abroad, and writing about several aspects of their travels. When one looks at the history of travel writing, one notices that women writers are much lesser in number. If you make a list of both, then you have lots and lots of male writers, but very few women writers. And more so when you come to India, we have even fewer of them. And when you look at the kind of writing that these women were doing, they're mostly using the epistolary form of writing. They were writing letters and journals, and also the epistolary form was one that was thought to be associated with the feminine, with the domestic, where they're writing letters to their people at home and noting various ideas, various things that they saw on all of these travels. And the use of this form also worked to convey the idea that, in spite of the fact that these women were traveling, they were very much, in spite of the fact that they were in the public domain, the woman was also someone who was rooted to the private space of the home. As Srimati writes in this chapter, Krishna Bhavini's work is very, very different. And her work is a very strong critique. So she is looking very objectively when she travels to England, when she goes to London. She is observing every aspect of life. She's looking at the clothes that women wore. And there's a reason also why clothes are important, because she had to dress in a particular way. She had to wear the ghomta. And then the first time when she's traveling by train, she notices differences. When she's on the ship, she doesn't have the ghomta. So this is a coming out of that world as well. But she's noticing all of these, and she's comparing them with what she finds here in India. At each and every step, you notice she's doing that, and it's a very objective kind of a noticing that she does, and she's writing about each of these, about the English man, the English woman, about society, about their religion, about the kind of things they like to drink, and how they love to go to pubs, which she does not approve of. But she's putting all of them in the context, and she's constantly comparing it with the condition of women back in India, and how things are very, very different out here. So it is not just a work of travel writing, and Srimati's chapter locates the text in the context of the time, in the context of travel writing, by men, by Indian women, and then goes on to give a a very detailed critique of the text, of this particular text that she is, looking at very, very close quarters. So what I find therefore very interesting about this particular chapter and about the entire book itself, and I was just telling Sreemati that before the event began, that is, in spite of the fact that this is a very academic work, a work that brings these very four important writers and their texts to us, we can approach these texts, as academics, but I also feel that because of the way she writes, these are texts, this is a work which would appeal to anyone who's interested in women writing. One need not be an academic to be interested in this work, and I think that is what is very, very, very interesting about this work. There is a very distinct pattern in which she moves, very detailed work that she does, and I'm sure that this particular work will it will definitely be of work to anyone who is into academics or into this particular area of study. But I'm sure it's also going to add to several other works on women's writing and on literature and society that we have in the 19th century. Thank you.
So we've heard two very interesting perspectives. One with ma'am talking about giving a brief overview of the women who are included, women authors who are included in this work, and then Nishi focusing on one particular chapter, Krishna Bhavani Dash, and how Sreemati has negotiated with her maiden work, with her travelogue, not the maiden work, with her travelogue, and how she has placed it within the context of travel writing. So with that we now move on to Sutanuka. Sutanuka, with a slight change, we keep it to 8 minutes itself and just one round.
We decided on 8 minutes.
No, 8 minutes. 6.
Good evening, one and all. Respected Sanjukta. No words are perhaps enough to thank Sreemati for, giving me this absolute honor to be included in this panel. As we all know that women are a different species, much needed and much neglected and ignored. But in Sreemati's book, Women and the Romance of the World, 19th century context in Bengal, we find that these women are eloquent, and we have seen that she has very successfully stitched the lives and times of four phenomenal women: Kailash Bashini, Rashundari, Krishna Bhavini, and Binodini in her book, using threads of many hues: pain, suffering, neglect, umbrage, desire, and of course, yearning for identity and recognition. Much has been spoken about the title. Yes, the title is very interesting and intriguing, as these four women, they write the romance of the world, the romance of learning, as Sreemati has used in her text. Self-realization and self-awareness is endorsed. And I find that her book is very, very comprehensive, very detailed, multi-layered, and very crisp, which, as Nishi just told, that which can be read by scholars like Sanjukta and non-scholar Akhyata Mohila like me. Okay, so that is the power of the book. Okay.
This is your 19th century line.
From 19th century to 2024, let me come back. Okay, so we find that as, Professor Dasgupta was telling, that two women coming from privileged families. Rashundari's, since I had worked on her struggle is of a different sort. And, she used to give ghunta, and once when her husband's horse was there, Shami ghorake dekhe ghunta diyeche. So such was the kind of life that these women with ghuntas, they used to live. And we find that, these women, they have completely, changed the literary map of Bengal and, of course, India. So when we see Kailash Bashini, there is Hindu Mohilagane Hinavastha, or the woeful plight of Hindu women, which was, published by her husband. It intrigues me that, there was a husband even in 19th century who was so caring, that he took the initiative to educate his wife. This is something exemplary. And, we find that Sreemati Di has almost, dissected this Kulin class, the Brahmin women belonging to the Kulin class, who were mostly Rani Brahmins. And she does it, she dissects the terms Kulin, Noikosho, and Shotriyo with clinical precision. And at the end of the essay, Kailash Bashini speaks of the poor condition of the Brahmin widows. They used to, starve. And one by one, we see a montage of the scenes revolving around the Bengali women of the 19th century. Now, when we come to Rashundari, we see that the first autobiography in the Bengali language was written by her. Okay, not a man, but a woman. Okay, so, and her life and her autobiography, Amar Jibon, is unique for it encourages women to rise above the patriarchal norms and create a world of their own. In 1868, when she finished writing the first version of Amar Jibon, she was 59. In 1897, at the age of 88, she added a second part and a new version came out. Now, why she revered so much even today in 2024, 27 July? What is the reason? Is it because we find Sreemati Di writing about her? Or is it because she is Rashundari? Yes, Sreemati Di has she has made us think twice or think thrice or 4 times, million times about her. And she is revered today because we see her as a preeminent among a line of thinkers who spelled out at length the societal, the societal costs of failure to give women what they deserve. This is very important. So Amar Jibon is the first example of a modern woman's writing in Bengal. She writes of her own life in her own words. This is very important. She had no schooling. Ditokhara, when Baba was working on her, I first learned the word Ditokhara. One who masters the letter, Ditokhara, because she was completely unlettered, So this itself is a huge battle. And therefore, when she writes in her own words, she therefore breaks new ground and inspired thousands of women to aspire for educating themselves. For us sitting over here to speak few lines in English is very easy because we have that training. But for her, I just can't even imagine. She has not only deconstructed her life and times, but she has reconstituted the lives and fates of several other women of the future. So Rashundari did not show any self-conscious cultural project to situate the historically and culturally grounded feminist concerns, but she raised questions and foreshadowed the future intellectual and political constructions of Indian feminism. Now, coming to the Krishna Bhavini's traveler, Englandে Bangali Mohila, a Bengali woman in England, which I should say, because Nabanita has very, very well translated, and I'm happy and honored to go through that book too. So with that traveler, we travel across time and space, and we find that there is a sharp contrast between the lives of the Mem Sahibs and the Hodobhangini Bangali Mohila. There's a huge difference between them. And one thing which I'll say that, yes, I'll wind up quickly, that she is very confident about herself, and we find the another woman, Binodini. She is Nuti Binodini, and considered to be an amoral woman. So she had also changed the entire map of how how the Hindu, the upper caste and upper caste Hindu men, they used to look at these women or these performers. So this book chronicles time, and I hope that it is going to turn a new leaf in women's writing. And I loved the way she has used language as a tool. It is very crisp, and I absolutely am floored by her style of narration, and I was completely glued to the text. These women are our inspiration. So the trajectory from Pestle to the typewriter, from Andar Mohol to Bahar Mohol, from the home to the world is unique. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Sutanuka, and I must apologize for stopping you, all of you midway, but then that's the task that Sreemati has assigned to me today. So it's been a very enriching discussion where we hear Sutanuka and Nishi focusing on particular chapters of Rashundari Devi and Krishna Bhavini Dash. Krishna Bhavini Dash being actually an author very close to my heart, because I've been working with her for many years, but I'm not going to talk about Krishna Bhavini Dash today. And maybe Nishi can do the job of stopping me if I'm overstepping time. I am in the dual role of moderating as well as talking about the book. So, as ma'am had started the discussion by talking about how these 4 women were impacted by their caste and religious background and the family, the class they belonged to, which impacted in certain ways their trajectory, and the way Nishi and Sutanuka then wove through the trajectories of Rashundari Devi and Krishna Bhavini Dash. What I want to focus on is the way our author of this evening, she has contextualized all these 4 women within their intellectual, sociological milieu, even political milieu. I must begin with a small anecdote. Sreemati called me up one day and she said that, Nabanita, I'm doing a chapter on Krishna Bhavini Dash for the forthcoming book. Please don't feel bad, I have not used your translation. I have translated on my own. And I had to mention this today because this speaks of the generosity of her soul. I mean, there was no need for her to tell this to me. I wouldn't even have probably noticed that. But I felt so honored because I was I'm still at the beginning of my journey into this academic world, and there she is, such an eminent scholar, and she calls up to say this. That day I really understood what generosity means. Srimati Di's engagement with gender studies is not limited to this book only. I must mention this particular book as well, which now is there in our college library, which is Intertexts of Writing, Race, Class and Gender and Historical Context, Toni Morrison, Bessie Head and Mariam Ba. And it is within this book where I find that a germination of the next book, the one that we are celebrating today, is also there, because in the preface to that book, she says, I thank the first generation of women writers in Bengal, like Rashundari Devi, Krishna Bhavini Das and Kailash Bashini Devi, for breaking the silence that prevailed over women's ability to both read and write. I thank Sri Ramakrishna for being part of my life and Rabindranath Tagore for enfolding me in his words and melodies. So she places herself in that trajectory, and no doubt this book, Women and the Romance of the World, has to follow, because when you are thankful to these women who have shaped probably in many ways shaped the way today's women are, it is such a book is bound to follow. The most significant aspect of both these books that I found was the introductions. The two introductions, they are so enriching. While in the chapters she's focusing on individual authors, it is in the introductions that the scholarship actually flourishes, drawing from multiple traditions of Western and Indian epistemology. Srimati Di places these 19th century women of letters within both national as well as global trajectories. To understand these authors in a holistic way, it is very significant that we locate them within the contemporary sociological, cultural, intellectual traditions. And when we are looking at Krishna Bhavini Das, we must also say the political tradition, because the nationalist movement, she becomes very much a part of this nationalist movement. And this book provides a fascinating study of that cultural and intellectual background. She refers to the leading feminists and with repeated references to Thorel Moa's female, feminine and feminist, the lens through which she is actually looking at these women who are writing in the 19th century, and also provides a very detailed and engaging understanding of the 19th century intellectual tradition. Srimati Di says, and I'm quoting from her book, I contend that women or female as a new sign similarly disrupts the syntax of the 19th century and earlier Bengali culture, reversing and realigning conventional notions of expectations of women's agency and power. This contention of hers, I think, in a nutshell, captures the entire the state of women in 19th century India in entirety. Interestingly, her erudition gets reflected through her understanding of these 19th century women across India. We find references to Anandibai Joshi, Pandita Ramabai, Hoimoboti Sen, and many others. So though she's talking about 4 authors in details, it's not just these 4 authors, but she's actually looking at the entire epistemological tradition of the 19th century women, pan-Indian. The second chapter of this book, Women and the Romance of the World, it talks about autobiography in a very detailed and enriching manner. Though the book focuses on women's writing, the point of reference from which Srimati Di begins is the major autobiographical texts of both European and Bengali tradition. She mentions Wordsworth's Prelude as well. And she unravels this genre of autobiography by looking at it through nationalist, feminist, and historical lenses. It defines autobiography at the beginning as an autodiegetic text, autodiegetic as in where narrator is the protagonist, but then gradually deconstructs this tendency, this patriarchal majoritarian tendency to finally critique the autobiography as a feminist autobiography, as a women's self-representation, which is often a counter-hegemonic discourse. And this ends with an understanding of the need to historically contextualize these autobiographies, which is why the need to go back to these writings again and again, these life writings and autobiographies. So this historical and intellectual contextualization happens within the next subsequent chapters that she talks about, but very interestingly, she doesn't end where she promises. The concluding chapter is a valuable addition because it goes on, the title is The Story Goes On, and there she talks about the fruits of labor of what she calls, I quote, various conjunction of women and agency, women, the letter, etc. So this is a much needed stock taking of what the struggles of those early women had led to and how their legacy lives on. And it gives a holistic shape to the book, stretching its relevance even beyond its promise. So that's what I have been, like, I've been completely floored by the book, and if someone now looks at my laptop, the person will find yellow highlights throughout the book. Now over to Sreemati Di for her comments.
Yeah, it was all so wonderful. And I'm going to start with a round of thanks because I'm really thankful for this evening to IPPL and the EC of IPPL, Sanjukta Di and the others, Bloomsbury for having published the book, the 4 panelists, and the outstanding volunteers who constructed, organized, and managed this entire program, the wonderful audience, the distinguished guests. So I'm really grateful that the older we get, the more grateful we become. So I'm really grateful to all of you for having come here. I'm just going to read out a bit. I've written something, I'm going to read it out. When I went to school in America at Rutgers University, in the spring of 1993, I took a course entitled Minority Women Writers. And the 3 writers that I worked on for my PhD all come out of that course. At that time, I encountered a term, revisionist historiography. That was used by the critic Ashraf H. Rushdie to describe Setha. Setha is the black slave mother of Toni Morrison's Beloved, who slits her 2-year-old daughter's throat to prevent the latter's return to slavery. And then she tells the story in her own words. So this previously occluded and silenced subject of history gets to narrate her story in her own words. So a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, my book, everything, is about women claiming their voices. That is the great advantage we all have today in this room, is that we speak in our own voices, and if people shut us up, then we fight. Most of us do. So, claiming one's voice, claiming an autonomy, and autonomy through language. Sri Potro, if you go back to that story by Rabindranath. So the word potro, it's a letter, the epistolary format that women often used, and the letter as in the script. So this term, revisionist historiography, it kind of thrilled me. And I started on an excavationist quest, much like I do not want to put myself in the league of Virginia Woolf, who in my mind is probably one of the most brilliant women who ever wrote. But when Virginia Woolf found only a few books written by women in one shelf of the British Library, she went in search of women writers. Sutanuka has worked on Hannah More, and she constructs a literary historiography. That is the first text of feminist literary historiography. Alice Walker, in In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, does something very similar. She is rereading Woolf, recasting Woolf, and she did not wish to write like black male writers. She did not wish to write like white men writers and white women writers. So she goes in search of her four mothers. And she finds them in the jazz singers, the blues singers, in Zora Neale Hurston, but principally in her own mother, who created beautiful gardens in spring. That's why the name of the essay is In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. Her instinct for beauty and form she gets from her mother. So, the four writers that I study in this book, and I was interested in alternative histories like Ranajit Guha, Partha Chatterjee, in their subaltern historiography. They are not interested in vertical models of nationalist endeavor, but in horizontal patterns of nationalist activity, like in peasant movements. I tried looking for examples from Bengal, and from Bengal, I have to say from Bengal, not India, really. Now, my central signifier or critical term in this book is romance. A romance with language, ideas, self-discovery, self-knowledge, and self-definition. Instead of patriarchy having the last word about everything and dictating what a woman should or shouldn't do, women do it on their own, willy-nilly. Among all the women I study, I find Rasha Sundari to be the most exceptional. She's the true hero of history who writes an outstanding chapter of woman's agency in the history of the nation. She steals a page from her husband's Bhagavad Puran. She steals a page from her son's Talpatra. Then she takes the 2 pages and under her pallu while she's cooking, she compares the 2 scripts. And she goes back to the few lessons that she had had as a child. And she says, Ami gongaiya porite shikilam. So hers is an epic enterprise. That's how I see it. It took epic strategizing, it took epic effort, and it was an epic achievement. And she was so generous too, and so believed in women's solidarity that she says later on in her life, it is gratifying to see that women nowadays have so much freedom. And Mariam Abba, one of the writers that I worked on for my thesis, the first Senegalese woman writer, after coping with her husband leaving her after having 12 children with him, with her eldest daughter's beautiful friend. So she says, my heart rejoices every time a woman emerges out of the shadows. She also writes, the power of books, this marvelous invention of astute human intelligence. And so all the writers in the book, the Brahmo Kailasvashini felt that all of India should turn Brahmo, that Brahmoism was such a great religion. Brahmo Kailasvashini, taught by her husband and excoriating the plight of Hindu Brahmin girls against Andakulinism. Krishna Bhabini, having the guts to cross the Kalapani for a sight of England, where she stayed for 10 years and analyzed both its strengths and flaws and hit out against the oppression of Indian women in India. But there's one thing I will mention. Tilottama's only daughter, Krishna Bhavini's only daughter, Tilottama, died. Her father-in-law was Srinath Das, who was a friend of Vidyashagor's and ostensibly supported widow remarriage. But when his oldest son got married to a widow, he asked him to leave the house. And because this son lived in England for such a long time, he excommunicated him too. He didn't give the 5-year-old Tilottama to her mother. Tilottama dies. She writes a poem that is full of indignation and sorrow over her mother's betrayal, whatever, leaving her. And Krishna Bhamini made sure that her daughter's poems were published alongside her book. So you see the cost at which women achieve. Even today, this dialectic of home and workspace is not easy for any woman who's sitting in the audience. And then we have Binodini, who charts a woman and a prostitute's journey from the margins to stardom, and the excitement of being a performer. And as Sanjukta mentioned, she says Modhur Sriti. The word Modhur is a very eloquent one in Bangla, So she says the Modhur Sriti of the days of theatre, they surrounded her all the time. I will close with one quote from an African writer who describes the trajectory of many post-colonial African writers. Dupilo a la machine a écrire, meaning from the rice pounding machine to the typewriter. Thank you.
Nabanita আমার কাছ থেকে তখন আমার একটা I wanted to talk, but she sort of made me so jittery. This is one little bit I want to add to what I have to say, is in the 19th century, in 1884, there was a feminist man, that is Friedrich Engels. Origin of the family, the private property, and the state. And that is a brilliant discourse on the subordination of women. And I will and the colonization of women, as we call it nowadays, but the line in Engels was, if men are the bourgeoisie, the women are the proletariat within the home. Thank you.
So, with that, we come to an end of this brilliant panel discussion, and now over to the coordinators. Oh, sorry, we have a question answer session, right? Okay, right, sorry. So we open the floor for the question answer session from the audience. Someone might question to the author, yes.
No, questions to everyone.
I think Nandini also wrote some books on, and also she wrote a memoir and autobiography,
Yes.
but that you have not been included in the book.
No, I haven't. I had to choose.
Only 4.
Not only 4, but I could not sort of include everybody. And I have Rokia in this book because Rokia was a signal, that outstanding woman who wrote this famous essay, Olunkar na Badge of Slavery, that men give women jewelry to express their love or, whatever. And women accept them, but they are actually chains of slavery. That was a very revolutionary essay. আর গৌতম দা এটা আমি জানি না, আমি কেন নন্দিনীর ব্যাপারটা আমি জানি
বেরিয়েছিল পুলিন বিহারি সেন বের করেছিলেন পরে, এবং হি স্টার্টেড ফার্স্ট চিলড্রেন্স ম্যাগাজিন বালক।
Yeah, please.
Thank you all the respected speakers and scholars for the extremely insightful discussion. I am Anurag Moitri, a transgender civil rights activist. আমি একটু শ্রীমতীদের কাছে একটা প্রশ্ন করতে চাই যে I just want to flag a question that when we talk about the women and the romance of the world, কারণ মহিলা শব্দটি তো এখনো সেভাবে বিনির্মাণ বা পুনর্নির্মাণ হয়নি, কারণ still we cannot denigrate the biological essentialism of the word women. তো আমরা যারা হয়ে ওঠা নারী বা যে নারীত্ব আমাদের মতো বহু মানুষকে আমরা বলি অর্জিত নারীত্ব, তো হ্যাভ ইউ এভার ফেল্ট দ্য আর্জ অফ রাইটিং অ্যাবাউট দ্য ট্রান্স উইমেন who in spite of all the vagaries, nihilism and apart from all the nothingness were caged in an undesired body and society? Have you ever felt of writing and drawing an analogy between the commonality of pain of the women and the trans women in the society? Number one. And the last question is, when we are fighting against the patriarchal hegemony, আমরা যখন দেখছি যে বিভিন্ন সাহিত্যে লাইক ফিমেল ইম্পার্সোনেশন, চৈতন্য মহাপ্রভু থেকে আরম্ভ করে ঠাকুর শ্রীরামকৃষ্ণ বিং মাইসেলফ ইনিশিয়েট ফ্রম রামকৃষ্ণ মিশন, এবং পরবর্তীকালে সেই লিনিয়েজে আমরা চপলদা বা চপল রানী বা চপল ভাদুরী বা কিং টুইন্স যাদেরকে আমরা দেখেছি, বাবরি রানী ইত্যাদি, ওই যে ক্ল্যান বা ফ্রেটার্নিটি যারা ছিলেন, মহিলা রূপে যারা অন্তরেতে নারী ছিলেন। তো একদিকে সোসাইটি এদেরকে পুজো করছেন, ওয়ার্শিপ করছেন, আবার সেই সোসাইটি ট্রান্স মানুষদেরকে ডিনাইলে চলে যাচ্ছেন, এই যে অ্যাট্রসিটি সেম সোসাইটি। তো এইটা আমার মনে হয় এটা যতদিন না মানে আপনি অ্যাজ অ্যান অ্যাকাডেমিক অ্যান্ড স্কলার এবং যেভাবে আপনি ইন্টারসেকশনিটি বা সাবঅল্টার্ন মানুষদের ইথোস বা ইমোশনসটাকে আপনি ফিল করছেন, তো আপনি কি এটাও মানে আপনাকে একটা অনুরোধ যে অ্যাজ অ্যান অ্যাক্টিভিস্ট যে এটা যদি আপনি আরেকবার ক্রিটিক্যালি রিথিঙ্ক করেন, যে এইটা নিয়ে যদি আপনি আরেকবার একটু ভাবেন বা লেখেন যে এই যন্ত্রণার যে কমনালিটি অ্যান্ড সলিডারিটি অফ পেইন বিটুইন দ্য টু মার্জিনালাইজড ক্লাসেস।
খুব ভালো পয়েন্ট, খুবই ভালো পয়েন্ট। এবং সত্যি কথা, এই যন্ত্রণাটা সাংঘাতিক, এর মধ্যে রিলেট করা যেতেই পারে। আর আমি এটাও লিখতে পারতাম যে উমেন একটা আনস্টেবল ক্যাটাগরি, এটা আমি লিখতে পারতাম ডেফিনেটলি।
Mine is not a question, it is just not even a comment, just maybe sharing an emotion in fact. So I've known Sreemati for close to a quarter century now. I just joked that I was the tail of the department where she was the head for a couple of years. You know, I have, like we were colleagues for a few years and then we were not, because I went abroad, came back, and I've had a very different trajectory. But in all the last 17 years, when we've not been colleagues anymore, we never lost touch, and we've kept we've engaged with each other's work. And in all this while, you know, I've seen this journey. I've seen this journey of hers from when she was a very young mother with 2 kids, trying very hard to do this balancing act that she just mentioned. And from there to where she's now, publishing this book with a very big publishing house, her children grown up, married and settled. I just wanted to say that, you know, what she writes, I've not read this book, so I actually had a little bit of a hesitation standing there launching the book, because I've not read the book. I felt that I don't have a right to do so without reading the book. But the thing is, I just feel that whatever has been discussed so far about what women have done and what she's written about in this book is something, she herself exemplifies that struggle. And I'm extremely happy as a sister, as a colleague, as a friend of long standing. We don't meet much, and this is not the place to go into the reasons why, but I'm extremely proud and happy for her. So this is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nishi. And I admire your struggle too and achievements.
So should memoirs. So